Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm your guest host for today, Misty Winston, and we have another jam-packed show, another one. This is a big one. This is a big one. So we're going to dive right in. We're not going to mess around. Later on in the show, we're going to have Kit from Hardlands Media joining us for the back half of the show. So make sure you stick around for that. But to open the show, I'm very excited about this. I'm not going to lie, though. I'm a little overwhelmed. So we're going to be talking to Whitney Webb and Mark Goodwin. So Whitney Webb, and obviously don't need an introduction here, but we're going to do one anyway. Whitney Webb is an independent investigative journalist, author, and contributing editor at Unlimited Hangout. And Mark Goodwin is the former editor-in-chief of Bitcoin Magazine and the author of The Bitcoin Dollar and Economic Monomyth. Together, they have recently written a monster, absolutely monster investigative piece on the history, origins, and ambitions of Polymarket. The first part was recently published, so we're going to go through that. And then maybe at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what we can expect for the second half of this piece. So let's bring in Mark and Whitney. Hey, guys, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Hello, Misty.
Hey. Good to see you guys. Yeah, of course. This is, I'm not going to lie, a little overwhelming. This piece is massive. And so I wanted to start because I think that most people are pretty familiar with prediction markets and all of that stuff. They've become pretty ubiquitous in our culture in recent years. But what I found super interesting in just starting off your piece is how far back this kind of model actually goes. I mean, we're talking like 40 years of history or something. So when you guys were looking into this, what for you was the first use of this type of prediction model?
Yeah, so as we note in the piece, the first modern prediction market, you could either point to the Iowa electronics market, which came out of the University of Iowa in the 1980s. But the first one that's the most like the prediction markets we know today started in 1994. It was called the Foresight Exchange, and it was sort of the brainchild of this guy named Robin Hanson, who developed the idea or the concept of idea futures a few years before that. And so this was like a prediction market online, but it was with play money, right? Not real money like the ones today. And it allowed people to bet on all sorts of things that weren't just like presidential politics, which is how the Iowa one had kind of started, but also like, will this discovery happen in science? And, all sorts of general things not tied to traditional betting, I guess. So Robin Hanson is a recurring figure throughout this piece because not only did he create those really essential ideas to the genesis of modern prediction markets, but he also was the main system architect behind DARPA's, which is the U.S. military branch. Their failed efforts to create the policy analysis market, which colloquially kind of became known as the terrorism futures market and was highly controversial. And then he later became involved with an advisor to a Peter Thiel-linked startup called Augur that, as we note in the article, seemed to be the first attempt to resurrect DARPA's policy analysis market, and then had been contacted by Shane Copland, who created Polymarket before he officially made Polymarket. And the official narrative says that Hanson brushed off Copland, but after our article came out, Robin Hanson was like, actually, that's not true, but he didn't continue on. So I guess he was more involved. But he is probably the most important figure that we can thank for the current iteration of prediction market mania that we see today.
Yeah, they're everywhere, freaking everywhere, which, I mean, it's to be expected with things like sports betting and all of that. But I mean, Polymarket, I mean, you can literally bet on anything, which is insane to me. I remember seeing I don't even know what award show it was, but there was a clip of, what's that guy, Trevor Noah. And he said, like, just randomly said potato. And he's like, if you bet on me saying potato during this broadcast, you just won a lot of money. And I'm like, you can bet on people saying words? Like, that's crazy.
Right. Didn't that story just come out? Sorry, Missy, but didn't the story just come out yesterday or the day before that, like, Trump's teleprompter operator?
We're going to cover that later. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No. Yeah. I have that piece. I was going to do it with you guys, but we have so much to go through in your article that I'm like, I don't know if I can squeeze it in. So I am going to do a separate segment later on that story. Yes.
Great.
That's crazy.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad that you brought up DARPA, because isn't DARPA always involved? I mean, it's just, but we've seen this. Go ahead, please.
No, just DARPA essentially made the internet. So it was first ARPANET, I guess, before it became the DARPA free iteration we know today as the internet. And so a lot of their hands seem to be in a lot of internet related pies, I guess.
And that's a huge part of, I think, a lot of the work Whitney's been doing for years. And I've been tagging along recently. But yeah, just this kind of general idea of, a lot of these ideas started within the Pentagon and sort of military contractors. And it slowly went from being like direct, government public officials to then government contractors to then, the CIA starting a venture firm, and basically the intelligence and military community at this technological level moving entirely into the private sector as a way to deal with like public backlash. Whether it was specifically this, the terrorist futures market, one of the main reasons why this, the future map was shuttered, it was because, these two senators kind of came out and were like, this is crazy. They're like making bets on when the next 9/11 will happen. This is terrible. And so they like kind of realized, okay, we can't do this in the public sector, but if we kind of rebranded all of this stuff we had cooking here, with, guys that Whitney's been talking about forever, Poindexter, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of this, but this whole model is not new. Something starting in DARPA and then getting spread out into the private sector. And very specifically, we describe a new model in this piece, which I'm sure we'll get into, but this idea of the Napsterization model, which is kind of like the next iteration of, okay, we can't do it in the public sector, let's do it in the private sector. And then, well, actually, it's still illegal to do a bunch of stuff in the private sector. So let's create a company that just disrupts and blows up the market. And then we'll rebuild the market, charge a bunch of money for a service that was free, and basically do the Napster, do Spotify model. That's we propose that's what they did with Augur and Polymarket. So I'll leave the rant there. There's obviously a lot to cover there, but we'll get into it.
Honestly, there's so in going through this article, I'm like, how am I even going to do this? Like, I don't even know how to do this. Like, this is insane. It's just a lot. It's a lot. And my brain is so scattered that it's difficult for me to like hold things in places where they're supposed to be. And so I go all over the place. So I'm going to try really hard, guys, to be at least slightly.
No, don't worry about it. It is a lot of stuff. And honestly, it would be hard for me to keep it all in my brain if I wasn't putting it like on paper and publishing it as articles, right? Because if you're just like absorbing this stuff, it's hard to talk about it without organizing it, which is why we do long form investigative stuff. It's for the people that want to see the process and also the sourcing, but also like just for me, it's much easier to talk about something if I've written it out, Yeah,
that's fair. Because I've always been very intimidated by your brain, and Mark, you as well. But I mean, just like the idea that you're able to keep all of this information and then pull it, like I'm able to absorb information, but then to keep the names and the dates and the stuff and the programs and everything to just have readily available to pull at will. I don't have that. So I'm
still intimidated by her brain. I mean, it's not, come on.
I know you're trying to make me feel better. Like I write it down so it's easier. No, you just have a different brain. That's okay. I'm self-aware about my brain being not great. Okay. So in talking about like these defense programs, and this is not the first time that we've seen these like nefarious defense programs, they get sussed out. Somebody raises concerns about it, and then they sort of take it away very swiftly, and then they just reimagine it and then reintroduce it in the private sector. That's been something that they've done. I mean, with LifeLog becoming Facebook,
right?
It's that sort of same thing. And is that it? I mean, essentially, that's what happened here, right? They had this the policy analysis market, and they were, and essentially it was just like betting on terrorists, right? Betting on terrorism. And
yeah,
is the theory that if they have this market where you can bet on those things, are they positing that is a way that they can then prevent those things from happening, because then they can see who's betting where? Okay.
That was the argument, the idea that like the wisdom of the market would allow them to prevent things or know things before they happen. And so that's a key point to take from this whole idea of like what was the policy analysis market, which was a sub project under what Mark mentioned a second ago. Future Map was like the broader program that this was kind of nestled within. But basically, this was all under the umbrella of something at DARPA in the aftermath of 9/11, a brainchild of our friends Dick Cheney and John Poindexter, who, if you don't know him, was the highest ranking member of the Reagan administration, prosecuted with multiple felonies for his role in Iran-Contra.
Friend of the show.
So, yeah. So Dick Cheney was like, this is who should lead this office after 9/11. So, it's terrible. Just from that. But the Information Awareness Office was all about predicting things before they happen. And they said it was how we'll predict another 9/11 before it happens, was the justification at the time. But if you go back and study 9/11 and know that these motherfuckers were involved in creating 9/11, then obviously, they have an ulterior motive there. And so basically the goal of this was to create a surveillance dragnet, and all these different programs, including the policy analysis market, would feed the information, predictive information, and all this other data into the jewel and the crown of this office. And that program was called Total Information Awareness, or TIA, and they later renamed it Terrorism Information Awareness Market to try and make it sound like they weren't going to suck up data on millions of innocent Americans, which it still was after the name change. It was just like a PR thing when people started to get kind of concerned about it. So basically the outcomes predicted by things like the policy analysis market would have been fed into TIA. And so I've actually written about TIA a lot over the past several years. And if you're familiar with my work, you may know that I reported back in 2020 that Palantir is the privatized version of TIA. If you look at the evidence, it's very obvious that it's exactly what Peter Thiel and Alex Karp set out to do, incorporating Palantir right after the controversy hit TIA. They have that name change. And then a neocon in the Bush administration, in the Department of Defense specifically, is contacted by Thiel and Karp and sets them up with Poindexter because they want to recreate, and this is in mainstream media, they wanted to recreate what Poindexter had tried to do at DARPA. This is literally what it's supposed to be. And so Palantir is meant to, the privatized version still is meant to plug into all of these data sources and then predict things before they happen. That's why Palantir in the modern sense has been leading on predictive policing, which is essentially pre-crime. And they have various connections with other companies that have been privatized out of the same DARPA office, which was shut down, but not and defunded, but just divided up basically between intelligence agencies and the private sector. And the goal is the same. They just basically tried to activate these programs in a way that would sort of slip under the radar and not make people as mad. But it's basically an effort to lead us into pre-crime and predicting things before they can happen. And if you're aware of what Poindexter and a lot of these Iran-Contra guys were trying to do back in the 80s, this isn't about preventing terrorism. This is about quelling dissent and stopping dissent before it becomes a threat to their order. And if you look back at my past reporting on the continuity of government protocols that this Iran-Contra crowd, which included Cheney, even though he wasn't officially in government at the time, that they tried to develop, it was ways to basically suspend constitutional rights for Americans that might become unfriendly under a vaguely defined national emergency, which could include numerous things, including nonviolent mass demonstrations against U.S. military intervention abroad. So peaceful protests against something. Right. So now that we have, as we can potentially talk about later, it's not in the article, but we have people in the Trump administration saying the resurgence of political terrorism is here.
Yeah,
I'm also going to be talking about that later in the show.
Yeah, and Marco Rubio and these guys saying that, like, these are the neocons. They are back, and they are now trying to successfully have go live this system they were trying to create under George W. Bush. They have now made it, and they are trying to create the conditions to be able to use it and suspend people's constitutional rights. And so that whole national security memorandum, or NSPM 7, that they were talking about in that thing, it's all about being able to debank, defund, prosecute all these people, not just for what they have done, but for what they might do. And this was something that the Trump administration tried to do last time, if you were paying attention, by having people, by having AI scan social media and decide if you are showing early warning signs of neuropsychiatric violence, whatever that means, and then could flag you and treat you based on that. So anyway, I'll stop there.
And the development, the hypocrisy of it, last time we were on independently, but on the Jimmy Dore show, we were talking about the data center piece that we had just done in your home state in Ohio. And there's been a ton of public backlash at the data center movement, since it's become a really big political, I'm not saying since we went on I'm not saying it's us, but since, since that time,
it's been talked about more. Yeah. Yeah.
It's become a really big talking point, and people are starting to really push back. And you look at, these guys that's the big money behind AI, these Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, Thiel, and this group that, a year ago was on this big publicity tour about being debanked and about how banking is this constitutional or human right. And it's so crazy that the Biden war on crypto,
or on speech, right? Or censorship.
Yeah.
About these things.
Yeah. The right was so persecuted. And now, they're literally, the State Department is hosting, their own little, Bonnaroo, little festival, and they're all coming together, and they're like, we're going to work with local law enforcement and intelligence and the State Department and the military to identify, disrupt, debank lefties. It's like, what have the lefties done? If this isn't about speech, what have they done? There hasn't been a terrorist attack yet. I mean, it's not like there's been a data center that's blown up, nothing has happened. I'm not saying that it won't happen. Or that it won't be, a big deal moving on, that there might not be a violent leftist pushback. I'm not saying that that won't happen, but it hasn't happened. So what are we basing this on if it's not speech, if it's not rhetoric? And obviously it is. And these guys, now that it's like, oh, shoot, they're attacking us for, you know, this data center push, because people have realized that, oh, maybe this isn't data centers to like, solve cancer or fix agricultural problems or whatever. Maybe it's just a giant surveillance dragnet to go through all of our communications and triangulate everything and do heuristic analysis and everything. You know, maybe these data centers aren't pro-human. Maybe they are taking jobs. You know, maybe this isn't a good thing. And now they're like setting up an unbelievable group of collaborators to attack political dissonance. And, you know, this is America. We should have political dissonance. It should be allowed. Obviously, there's, you know, things that we don't condone, and there's things that are illegal and unconstitutional within dissonance. But but being a dissident shouldn't be something you should be afraid of being debanked for, especially after the way this administration came in.
Well, it's unconstitutional at the end of the day.
They claim to care so much about the Constitution. And this, for me, as a free speech activist who's very, very pro-speech, this has been something that has been the bane of my existence for a long time, because I feel like on each side, it's not one or the other. Leftists are all about free speech until they want to shut somebody on the right up. And then vice versa. The people on the right are very pro-free speech until they want to shut somebody on the left up. And so there's this just unbelievable glaring hypocrisy on both sides. And everybody wants their rights until they can effectively use it against their enemies. And so
it'll be used against everybody. Yes. That's the point. So like today, they're saying it's about leftists, but it's really going to be about anyone who like complains about specific agendas of the administration that's in power, even if it switches from, red party to blue party or whatever.
It's really all the same anyway.
Yeah, it's still going to be the same. So, the AI data center building push and the AI infrastructure build out, people that get in the way of that, even if they're on the right, will be targeted by this.
Right.
Yeah. And if you are against, I don't know, perhaps the Iran war as that continues to go, even though a lot of people on the right are against that, you could be treated as a political terrorist for speech. Yeah. There's a lot of efforts to develop this, and I would encourage people to go look at reporting by Unlimited Hangout from the past and others, just about how the U.S. government has been defining domestic terrorism in recent years.
For a long time. I remember it was like maybe 2016, 2017, maybe. I may be way off on the date there, but some years ago, I remember, I think it was Department of Homeland Security put out that little flyer thing about domestic violent extremists. And it was basically everybody. Like, hey, do you care about the environment just a little too much? You're an extremist. Hey, do you care about speech a little too much? You're an extremist.
My personal favorite is if you are against or angered by a perceived government overreach.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Suddenly you're a terrorist.
And these words, I mean, now basically getting this whole coalition of baddies, of ghouls together to fight, terror. The terror is such a good boogeyman because it can be redefined. Terror is such a subjective definition. Of course, there are things most people can agree on are terror, but like they can just say, oh, you're a terrorist. Yeah. You're a domestic, it's so wishy-washy.
But at the end of the day, the real terrorists are the national security state of the U.S. and several other countries. So any claim by them to actually be fighting terrorism is crap.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure this administration is waging a war without congressional approval. So I don't know.
Blowing up girls' schools. Yeah.
Yeah. Using Anthropic AI.
I mean, slaughtering civilians en masse, aiding and funding a genocide. We could go on and on and on. So yes. And I've been saying this for a long time. I mean, the United States is easily the world's largest terrorist organization, if by any measurable definition.
Yeah,
I don't think that there's any really debating that at this point. I mean, by far, it's not even close, not even close. I mean, somebody argued with me the other day that it's Israel that is in fact, and no, Israel has nothing on us. They haven't even existed long enough to be on our level. So yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing to watch this play out. And it's crazy to see American citizens cheering for this kind of stuff and not recognizing the danger that it puts them in. And again, it's that weird tribalism and hypocrisy where, oh, well, that person I don't like is going to be impacted by this, so I'm going to cheer it on, without the foresight of recognizing that this is coming for you too. And I mean, we've seen that time and time again. I mean, you had the right cheering on Black Lives Matter protesters getting brutalized, and then you had Black Lives Matter protesters cheering when J6ers got brutalized. And I'm like, you guys don't even realize that the reason this happens to you is because you cheer it on when it happens to the other side, and you're effectively giving permission for it to continue. And it's just
and you're not allowed to be critical of the U.S. government. I mean, they might make it illegal. Right now, it's not, which is nice. I'm glad we can all talk here today. But it's like, you can only be mad at Israel. You can only be mad at Russia. And, obviously we saw last night, China. And, it's like, those are, there's some blame to be given there. Sure. But like, why not get mad at the U.S. government for what they're doing? Why do we have to blame, China or Russia or Israel for everything and not the U.S. government for their participation in all of these things? I think the multipolar world, again, we could go talk 7 hours on a lot of these threads being brought up here. And I'm sure we should go back to prediction markets, but, but maybe this is a good segue. It's an interesting thing. We got in a lot of shit for this article because Whitney dared use the Israeli VC ties as the example in her tweet explaining the bullshit origin story of Shane Copeland and Polymarket, of being like, hey, he actually had this company beforehand that had all these ties to Israeli VCs, including family members of Netanyahu. And people went insane on us about how we're anti-Semitic and all this because we're talking about Israel. It's like, no, the piece is about DARPA. The piece is about U.S. intelligence. There's a bit about Israel in there, but like, what are we talking about?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Because Polymarket has been presented as this like cool, new, hip prediction market, like fun, trendy, whatever, founded by this plucky young college dropout who, started
it in his bathroom, Misty, all alone in his bathroom with a laptop on his toilet.
I mean, how many times have we heard that story? Google was started in a garage. Jeff Bezos, this plucky young guy, started Amazon from his garage. Like, it's just this ridiculous story that we just keep getting force-fed over and over again. So, and it's obviously just a front. And, they try to claim that this kid is just, this random guy who had this great idea. And it's not that. So who is Shane Copeland? Who is this guy?
So he grew up in New York, and as a teen, he was like smart but unmotivated. And he pretty much like admitted that as a teen, he realized that he'd have to find a different way to compete with his peers than conventional means to achieve his dreams of becoming fabulously wealthy, which of course he has since achieved. Yeah. So he figured out, did figure out a way to compete unconventionally. And as we note in the article, it seems like he did that by studying up on the big tech billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, which we talked about being very similar, almost too similar to DARPA's LifeLog. And also Travis Kalanick, who is of Uber fame and would later go in to invest in Polymarket, interestingly enough. And so basically, he became like a top expert as a teenager interning at this company called Rap Genius, which later just became called Genius, which is like this effort to annotate the web. And he became their top expert on Zuckerberg in particular. And so if you have closely studied Mark Zuckerberg's trajectory, you will probably know that the only reason the Facebook, at the time when it was founded, later Facebook and now Meta, was successful is because it got in bed with Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel very early, and that the guy that made that happen was Sean Parker, who is clearly a big influence, even though he hasn't overtly said it, on Shane Copeland, because Copeland later becomes, even before he creates Polymarket, obsessed with the idea of Napsterizing an industry, and becomes very focused from at least 2018 on Napsterizing finance, and has claimed that Polymarket is an effort to do that. And so basically, he's in all these profiles that have been written about him since Polymarket has like exploded in popularity and use. Not a single of them mentioned his company before Polymarket, which we thought was really weird, because they're basically treating it as he was a nobody and was broke. and then, but was into crypto. And then during COVID, he was like, oh, we need a way to predict stuff because of all this uncertainty in COVID. And then built this company in his bathroom. And then somehow 3 months later, being this nobody college dropout, attracts like $4 million in funding from all these, big name bros. Like, I don't know. That doesn't really happen. Epstein was a college dropout that somehow got all this stuff thrown at him too. Like, it's, there's something else going on there. And so we found this other company that he had before then, which was first called Token Bank and later became called Token Union. And lo and behold, it was a company deeply tied, of course, to the Ethereum ecosystem, which is important. And maybe Mark can talk more about that later.
Sure.
But, the Netanyahu connection we pointed out is that Token Union was specifically created as being extremely integrated with this other company called Bancor. And Bancor was co-founded by Netanyahu's niece and nephew. And it was just probably the most important component and partner of this Token Union company Shane Copland had. And then a couple of his advisors to this Token Union company were also kind of big name people with both ties. They were also simultaneously advisors to Bancor, and one of them in particular intimately involved in the Israeli venture capital scene, particularly as it relates to crypto and other high-tech ventures. And he is also in other ways explicitly partnered with other VC firms created by veterans of Israeli intelligence. And that particular firm that he's partnered with, their stated goal is to basically take Unit 8200 projects that were previously done in-house and then basically privatize them off, which also coincidentally from 2012 on has been an admitted Israeli state policy that they're using a bunch of these Unit 8200 veteran company as fronts actively for Israeli intelligence. So we found that pretty significant, and we're like, well, if he's obviously hiding this so extensively from his past and all these new profiles, like maybe this is why, but we don't really know, and we don't really know why he, and I guess the media that has covered him, is so committed to the story that he didn't have a real background before 2020. But obviously he had all these ties to like prominent VCs and to prominent crypto companies that are tied to the prime minister of Israel's family. And that probably explains how 3 months after he founded Polymarket and built it in his bathroom, that he was able to attract $4 million in funding from partners at like Andreessen Horowitz and the Balaji guy who did the network state. And then all these, prominent Coinbase veterans who at the same time had sort of sunset the competitor to Polymarket that we talked about earlier, Augur, that was basically pretty much overtly created to be a resurrection of DARPA's policy analysis market. And actually in part 2, but though we found it after publishing part 1, there's an interview that Copland gave in 2020 just after attracting this, $4 million in investment in, a 3-month-old Polymarket or wherever, where he basically says, when asked about DARPA's policy analysis market, he's like, yes, I'm super familiar. This is what they were trying to do. Oh, and also it's a key part of the passion behind why my team and I built Polymarket.
Right. The other thing that's interesting about this company pre-Polymarket is not only, of course, the Netanyahu Israeli intelligence connections. Yes, I think that's fair to say, but also it's the first time where we can see Shane being connected to the Thiel nexus.
Yeah. I should have brought that up. So the Netanyahu's niece, before creating Bancor, this company, had been a partner at Thiel's Founders Fund. And then Augur, which is we sort of frame as the predecessor to Polymarket, had been created by a Peter Thiel fellow, Joey Krug. And then he had sort of been intimately involved with Vitalik Buterin, the Ethereum co-founder, who was also a Thiel fellow, to develop that. And then, of course, Krug and Founders Fund come back and lead, I think, the Seed A round for Polymarket, sort of projecting it to the crazy heights it's seen since the 2024 U.S. presidential election. And this is significant because Thiel is the main guy that has privatized all these other information awareness office projects out of DARPA.
Yeah.
He's the one that privatized TIA's Palantir. He's the money source that allows Facebook to become an analog to the shuttered DARPA project known as LifeLog. And here his money is again resurrecting the policy analysis market.
Right. And then
what a coincidence.
And we look at
right?
early PayPal, which for some reason, everybody loves to talk about the PayPal mafia, but people don't like to talk about PayPal for some reason. And PayPal is one of the most important companies ever. They dollarized the internet. They made basically the de facto currency of the internet, the US dollar, which is an incredibly huge deal.
Yeah.
And no one ever talks about that. They talk about crypto, they talk about Bitcoin, but like the first guys that did this in a way that scaled was PayPal. And interestingly, where did PayPal kind of come out of? It kind of came out of the Stanford nexus in Silicon Valley, but specifically Stanford. And then where did they get their first money? Obviously, Thiel ran his own hedge fund and was a foreign exchange trader of currencies. And he put $1 million into the company with Levchin when they founded it. But the first institutional investor was Idea Labs, which was this incubator in Southern California. This guy, Lou Kerner, who's one of the main advisors to Token Bank, who's this guy that has all these connections to, former IDF funds.
Yeah.
He was the CEO of .tv at Idea Labs in the 90s, which was basically this, early internet streaming, early online video. Mm-hmm. And this nexus, the Idea Labs nexus, is a huge part of the current story of digital finance. Its founder, Bill Gross, was literally communicating with Epstein about starting, what would basically be a digital currency with a stable value. Whereas at that time, the co-founder of Tether, which is the biggest, stable coin in the world, basically the CBDC from the United States, again, in the private sector, not the public sector. This is this ongoing thing. He worked for Bill Gross at a gaming fund. Epstein and Bill Gross are talking, hey, how do we flip this Bitcoin thing on its head and make this dollarized? And they come up with this plan in emails that you can read at the DOJ's website. So this nexus, that same guy gave the first investment into PayPal, and the co-founder of Idea Labs is this guy, Bill Elkis, and he was a trustee of the J. Epstein Foundation in the 90s, like a longtime, multi-decade friend of Epstein. And these guys are the ones putting all the money into the early crypto community. So the Thiel Fellowship is extremely important. Thiel would not become what Thiel became without Idea Labs sponsoring them, giving them a bunch of money and incubating.
And if I can interrupt for a second, it's also important to point out, and you can expand on this as well, is that when PayPal was founded, before Idea Labs coming in, they were collaborating per Max Levchin with every intelligence agency that would talk to them, basically.
Yeah, so there's a pretty famous, it's kind of infamous clip of Max Levchin, the cryptographer and co-founder of PayPal, talking to Charlie Rose in, I think, like 2006, something like that, in that era. And he's like, when we were developing the anti-fraud algorithms at PayPal, I collaborated with every 3- and 4-letter agency. They were some of the most fruitful agencies or business partnerships I ever had. And he talks about how actually, when I first kind of graduated from the University of Illinois as a computer science major, I wanted to use cryptography to help the nation. I had come in as basically a refugee from the fall of the USSR. I came to America and I went and I applied to the NSA and was like, I want to use cryptography to help America. And the NSA basically was like, listen, you'll never be able to commercialize any of your ideas and any of your research if you work with us in the public sector. You'll never make a dime. What you really want to do is go to the private sector. So what happens? Levchin flies to Palo Alto, crashes at the first PayPal board member's couch, Scott Bannister, who happened to be a VP at Idea Labs at the time. He crashes on his couch. It happens to be in the same week, the day that DigiCash, which is at this point was the biggest attempt at doing digital cash, founded by David Chaum, that gets shuttered. Let's say it gets shuttered on a Tuesday. There's a big party at Stanford. They cut up all the assets, intellectual property, dissolve the company, which was the largest online digital payments company. And then 2 days later, Levchin has breakfast with Peter Thiel and comes up with an idea of making cryptographic money with PayPal.
At their first meeting.
At their first meeting, 2 days after DigiCrash shutters, the party's on Stanford grounds. He's living on Stanford grounds. He goes and has breakfast with Thiel on Stanford grounds. They start PayPal. That's kind of the first iteration of this Napsterization model, where you have Napster, DigiCash. They disrupt the payment space, inventing all of this stuff, but there's too much litigation and legislation, and it doesn't scale properly, and there's a lot of issues with it. So, hey, let's spin off and let's create this new company that will basically slide into this market that no one's dominated yet and create a monopoly. We're totally in the private sector, but we're talking to all the public sector, all of the intelligence agencies, and then they somehow managed to create digital dollars. It's quite a coincidence. And this model, the Napsterization model, like Sean Fanning and Sean Parker, who created Napster. Sean Parker, kind of has a similar story where he got in a lot of trouble when he was 15 and 16 years old for hacking a Fortune 500 company and some government websites. And the FBI raided his house, much like they raided Shane Copeland's house, and basically gave him community service. And as he admits, the CIA attempted to recruit him because, showing that you can hack into Fortune 500 companies and government websites is a pretty good, recruitment tool for the CIA. And where does he go? Instead of going to the CIA, he goes and works for Mark Pincus in DC at Freeloader, and he goes and works for UNet, also in DC. Mark Pincus becomes the co-founder of Zynga, which is one of the main reasons why Facebook explodes into the juggernaut it does. Farmville, you remember all those games. Yeah. That was Pincus. That was Pincus. And then UNet is basically a bunch of former DARPA officials who took all of the IP and stuff they created in making commercial internet and applied it to the public sector, or rather to the private sector. And they took all of this DARPA technology and turned it into basically the first successful internet service provider. So this community, this model, these guys, they have the same origin stories. It's the same nexus. Yeah. It's the same money that's supporting all of these guys. It's the same story of this disruptive company coming in and messing up everything, but then folding for some reason because of, the law wasn't ready yet, or they intentionally shuttered it. And then they recreate it with a pay model, like Napster getting shut down and then becoming Spotify. With Sean Parker. Sean Parker is one of the main advisors and main investors. And wow, it turns out he turned it into a multi-billion-dollar company, this thing that they created in their bedroom, So yeah.
That's what I find so fascinating. It's the same cast of characters, and it's the same playbook. It's the same MO over and over and over again. I mean, listen, it's effective, I guess. Good for them for figuring it out. But
it does work for them.
It does, which is wild to me, though, because we have seen it happen so many times. You would think that people would start to question, like, hey, wait a minute, another plucky young guy in his bathroom or in his garage who is broke, but suddenly has all this access to millions of dollars to start this thing that used to be a government-run program. But I mean, it's kind of crazy. And it's fascinating to me on many levels for multiple things that they do that just work. I mean, for example, we mentioned briefly Trump and his new China Gate. I mean, we just did this. We just did the same thing, and we're going to do it again. I mean, it's no different than when I think it was in Iraq, they were saying that they were giving their soldiers erectile dysfunction medication. What is it called? I'm blanking. Viagra. Thank you. And then they regurgitated that exact same propaganda for Ukraine, for Russia. And I'm like, we need better writers. You guys have there's not an ounce of creativity.
It's okay. I'm personally waiting for the story of, Iran throwing babies out of incubators. And, I'm sure that will happen eventually. I mean, they have a really tired propaganda playbook, but it works. I guess it works still, mainly because of how extensively they're able to manipulate the media environment and how a lot of people have been sort of, deluded into thinking that the government doesn't manipulate independent or alternative media. in that, you know, a lot of the podcasts, including like, you know, the one run by Stephen Miller's wife, are somehow like independent and fair and not like government propaganda ops. I don't know.
Yeah. And there's a lot of those, all the big names, really. I mean, it's just, and again, it's such an effective thing. And that whole thing is fascinating to me because it's usually somebody who is very mainstream, who's then booted from mainstream, who then envisions themselves as like this plucky outsider who's going to fight back against.
Dude, I feel like that was perfected a few years ago by these guys that would get canceled and then go on Rogan and then just explode. And it was like the cancellation pipeline to internet fame.
Well, I mean, there's several people who use that as like their tagline.
Weinsteins, I mean, all those guys.
They'll use it as their tagline, like, I'm the most censored podcaster on blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, bro, whatever.
It's like, you have millions of followers. What do you mean? Your banking stuff works great. Like, you're still banked. What do you mean?
Yes, all of it is absurd. Okay, so I wanted to ask something, because we talked about earlier how they're using this model as a way to kind of silence and control dissent, crack down on dissent, all of that stuff. But I'm wondering if there's also another aspect of this, and this is nothing new. This is something, a tale as old as time, the management of narratives, because I feel like they are very effective at, I mean, and we see it on, I mean, there's a montage I saw earlier when I was doing research for this, where they were showing different mainstream news people saying, well, the predictive markets say, and I feel like that repetition of the markets say, that seeps into a consciousness. And then you start to, you can manufacture consent through that sort of a thing. You can implant narratives, you can manage narratives, you can change narratives, all of that stuff. I feel like that is kind of at least for me, like when I saw that montage, I was like, oh yeah, okay, yes, that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, good on you, Misty. So I don't know if we really talked about it yet, but the article that we're talking about right now is actually part one of a 2-part series. Mm-hmm. So what you just touched on is something that we were planning exploring in part 2, which is the idea of how, since these markets are now known for insider trading, and that even by their, the people that developed them, in a sense, like Robin Hanson described insider trading as a feature, not a bug. That it also, the way it's being used now is giving these Polymarket unprecedented ability to manipulate reality. And manage media narratives and basically seed the idea that something will happen, or like this is the outcome because the market says so, even though they've essentially said that, these markets can be manipulated. And, if you've been paying attention, like a lot of the people in power are notorious for manipulating markets, right? And Wall Street executives go, get a slap on the wrist from the regulatory bodies of the US all the time for manipulating important markets and important market benchmarks. So, that's all important to include. But the other thing I'll bring up here, because I don't want to give up too much about what we're going to discuss in part 2 before we have it, is that according to Copland, his whole goal is really to have Polymarket, among other things, be the future of news. And this is part of their reasoning behind their partnership with X, formerly Twitter, which is probably why our article made Nikita Beer very mad, because they want Polymarket and its, market outcomes and whatever to basically be treated as news stories. And at the same time, they've partnered with X, of course, they've partnered with Dow Jones, the parent company of the Wall Street Journal, with Substack, with tons of, media platforms of extreme significance.
And they got also billions of dollars from the ICE, the giant exchange in New York. So, and their Palantir
the New
partners.
York Stock Exchange. Well, the Palantir being partnered with them is just an example of what I talked about earlier, about how Total Information Awareness and all the other programs at the Information Awareness Office were always meant to interface. And so, of course, the modern iteration of Total Information Awareness is partnered with the modern iteration of the policy analysis market.
Yeah. And I feel like this is, again, tale as old as time, but there has been a significant shift away from mainstream media. They do have a more difficult time in like the internet social media age of controlling narratives. We've seen that with Palestine and Israel. Prior to October 7th, they were very it was easy for them to just tell CNN what to say about whatever was happening in Gaza, and CNN would say it, and most people were none the wiser. And now we have people who are actively on the ground in real time reporting things that are happening. And I think that they've known that this is a problem for a long time. They've seen the shift away from mainstream press. I think that, as we talked about with the independent podcasters, that has been a very concentrated effort of shifting people into those positions as they're losing the support in the mainstream press, because then they can just kind of move things around. And this feels like this is just a really effective offshoot of that strategy, where they can use these markets. And I mean, just if you repeat it enough times, people will just start to believe it. And then subconsciously they just accept that, oh yeah, we're going to attack Iran, or we're going to whatever. And it just becomes like this accepted reality, when in fact it was just a manufactured one. So, I mean, that's, to me, I feel like it's just a really terrifying aspect. I mean, with everything else going on, the AI and all of the other stuff where we don't even know what's real anymore. This is just another point. Yeah. Yes.
Eric Schmidt of Google and Henry Kissinger wrote a book saying this is what AI will do, like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's, again, been a very effective
strategy. And they're what they were saying about it is, like, once you can't tell what's real and what's not, you'll need a trusted AI to help sort through the noise for you.
Yeah.
Obviously an AI that they control. Great.
Right. And that also, this trust, right? This technological trust is a huge part of what the kind of the lie that is, the Polymarket play right now, of this idea that, well, markets can't be wrong, right? Like, there's an inherent truth to markets. There's an element of that is true, right? Like, the price is the price. That's true, right? I mean, you cannot argue with the price of, like, oil, right? I mean, that is the price of gold or whatever. Of course, that is factually correct. And that is because of market participants' actions, buyers and sellers. Yes, that is true. But that doesn't mean that it's like an accurate, fair price that is based on, normal conditions of a market. You can have a huge buyer or a huge short seller, or someone manipulating literally the exchange, like, display of the price, who is the trusted party that displays the ticker price of your stock or of your commodity. And Polymarket is playing that same role as, like, the oracle of how do these bets pay out. And there's been a bunch of issues with this, where we've seen stuff like, that bets pay out that, there's been big lawsuits and people that lost a bunch of money because they were correct, but the terms of the bet weren't actually held in the finalization and the payouts. And there's a bunch of different iterations and examples of that, and you can go look them up. But basically, the technological issue is that all of these things are they're based on cryptocurrency smart contracts, right? And that sounds really cool, right? Smart contracts. That sounds like these are really complicated, cool, but they're actually very dumb. They're really stupid pieces of programming that need and necessitate, if you're betting on, will Argentina win the World Cup? You need to have some trusted source be able to input into that smart contract, yes, Argentina won the World Cup, pay out everybody that bet yes. But who is that source? Who is the person that gets to say Argentina won? Is it ESPN? Is it CNN? Is it, so Polymarket is working with all of these media companies to build up this idea that this is a decentralized truth, and that the oracle that gets to decide who wins or loses is somehow decentralized. But it's not. They control the payouts at the end of the day. These things, this idea of solving the oracle problem, it is a computer science problem that has plagued internet-based consensus for a long time, and it has not been solved. And they found ways to obfuscate the centralization and the control, but it is still there.
If you ever want to see Shane Copland be extremely uncomfortable in interviews, just look for any time he's asked about how Polymarket deals with the oracle problem.
Right. And so this concept of the oracle problem, how do you determine the winner or loser of an online bet? This was something that was supposedly solved by Polymarket's predecessor, which we haven't talked about too much today, which is Augur. And there was this guy, Joey Krug, who was another whiz kid. He was mining Bitcoin at 15 years old in his room. And, he comes up with this idea of, hey, let's make prediction markets using cryptocurrency, because the issue with gambling and prediction markets as they had been previously is that they were still reliant on payment rails like credit card companies or bank wires that were still within the jurisdiction of the United States. And if you're doing some illegal offshore gambling site, you're funding, you have this really big attack vector, and that is your funding payment rails. And so credit card companies, banks, they weren't participating in offline gambling because they didn't want their shit, shuttered by the government. So they were able to close these offshore gambling accounts and previous iterations of prediction markets by attacking the choke point, which is payments. These guys all came together. In our argument, it's the PayPal nexus, the Teal nexus that created digital currency, whether it was just PayPal or the modern iterations today, like an Ethereum, which is what all the stable coins run on, like Tether and USDC, and what Polymarket runs on. It runs on a layer 2 of Ethereum. We don't need to get into the technical. It's boring. It will put you to sleep. But it runs on Polygon, and it's this layer 2 of Ethereum. But Ethereum was developed by Vitalik Buterin under a Teal Fellowship. He was being paid by the Teal Foundation or the Teal Fellowship to develop this more expressive, complicated version than what you could do on Bitcoin. And when Joey Krug was developing Augur, he was actually really influenced by this paper called Truth Coin by this guy, Paul Stork, about predictive markets using Bitcoin. And Vitalik went to him and went, no, Joey, don't do it on Bitcoin. Come do it on Ethereum. Come hang out with us. We're going to do it on this thing. And then Teal gives Joey Krug a bunch of money and a Teal Fellowship.
And then my favorite part, they decide at Augur, Joey Krug decides, how about we make our logo a one-eyed pyramid, which is the same logo that Total Information Awareness had, which was like a one-eyed pyramid beaming, the eye is beaming all over the earth. It's just like surveilling the whole planet.
Yeah. Again, just a stunning lack of creativity.
Market logo also has the pyramid beaming all over everything. It's like, oh my God, guys.
Right. But I mean, there's absolutely something to be said about, like, well, if they want predictive markets to exist because they want to do futurarchy and a lot of these new form of governance that are downstream, that's where all this philosophy was in the 90s and the 80s, but mostly the 90s, about predictive markets, was this idea of creating a new form of governance called futurarchy that uses people betting on policies and values rather than voting on them. And that is a purer vote because there's skin in the game. And we'll talk about futurarchy.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually out of time. Again, I knew this was going to happen. We were going to run out of time, and we weren't going to be able to get into everything. But that is exactly where this is headed. And I feel like I encourage everybody to go. It's a monster piece. It's very long. I had to read through it in bits and pieces. I took notes. Like, I'm a big note writer. So, and part 2 is going to be coming. So it's going to be even further. And I would love to have you guys back on once that comes out so we can get into, more of this. But I feel like this is something that, as I said, these predictive markets are so ubiquitous now. Like, they're everywhere. There's all of these different branches popping up. They've just become part of society. And I feel like they are 100% being used they've been weaponized from the jump to manipulate us, manipulate everything.
The point about the futurarchy thing, which is the bulk of part 2, is that not only are they trying to manipulate media narratives like you brought up, Misty, but the goal is to have this be a key part of a new system of governance, replacing our current form of governance, whereby whatever the Polymarket or like the predictive outcome is from one of these prediction markets will be used to decide policy in lieu of elections.
Yeah. Right. And that's where we're headed. And I feel like that needs, we just have to be, I don't even know if it matters if we're aware.
I know we are running out of time here, and I just wanted to throw in a quick. We actually just started a new podcast to just be able to sit down and talk about. It's like the idea is like the article is the meat and the potatoes and the sides, and it's a whole big feast, and it's a multi-day feast, and there's so much there. And then let's make this little thing where we sit down and we talk literally in this same room.
Because not a lot of people read.
Not a lot of people
don't have time to read, but they have time to listen. Yeah. So yes, we know people have been asking for us to do this for years. Now we're doing it.
Yes.
I love
and
that.
it's publicly available already. The first one for members of Unlimited Hangout, but the public release will be next week, including on YouTube, which I have generally avoided most of my career. But one of the reasons we're doing it is if you think you've been watching videos of me on YouTube, you most likely have not. I've done maybe like 4 interviews all year. And the rest is AI slop. And so we can't report impersonators of me or Unlimited Hangout without having a YouTube channel ourselves.
Yeah. So it's at Unlimited Hangout Podcast. So check it out, and we'll see you Monday morning. And
everybody can go. Whitney's on Twitter. Everybody can go follow her. Mark is also on Twitter. And then this is just the piece. And then, of course, go to Unlimited Hangout. Tons of great reporting there on this and other things. Obviously, Whitney's Epstein stuff has been incredible over the years. So everybody go check that out. Check out the podcast. It's coming. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking this much time. I apologize for taking this much time, but this article really required it. So
no, it's all good. We definitely understand. It's a lot.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us, Misty.
My brain hurt a little bit. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you. All right, guys. That was Whitney and Mark. That was a lot. My brain does actually hurt a little bit. So I think Misha's going to come in and do some super chats, perhaps.
Yes, I am. My brain hurts too.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Misty and Whitney and Mark. All right. Brad Gilbert is the first out the gate. Instead of Whitney, Rogan had Carrot Top. Whew. I was worried about Carrot Top. All the proof Kerp and Jimmy should need that Rogan's. All the proof Kerp and Jimmy should need that Rogan's. Oh, a useful idiot. Okay. I thought I was reading that right. Okay. Brad doesn't like Joe Rogan. Thank you, Brad. Aquarian Conspiracy. Thank you for that little donation. And the little fox, I think, is the emoji. Vianticus Prime. I'm so glad the guy I voted for is doing the thing I didn't want the other guy to do. Vianticus Prime is back again. Everything's a scam. Everything's a lie. Everything's hypocrisy. And so you don't comply. T-Bone, have a great show, Misty. Loving your guest lineup. And Kit is dope. Yeah, Kit is going to be on in just, well, as soon as I'm done reading these. So here, let me keep reading. Thank you, T-Bone. Alejandron, I'm so glad to see you guys here today. The propaganda they repeated for this war that disgusted me to see people fell for was the weapons and killing of civilians always right before we go in. Works. Thank you, Alejandro. Hey, that's it. And we are going to, Misty, you all set? Yep. Throw back to Misty.
I'm ready. All right, guys. That was fantastic. Again, thanks to Whitney and Mark. That was a lot. Yeah, my brain really does hurt every time I read Whitney stuff. So talking about it was also pretty intimidating. Okay, so we're going to move on. Thank you again for tuning into the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm your guest host, Misty Winston, and I'm very excited. I haven't seen my pal Kit in a long time, but my pal Kit Cabello from Hardlands Media is joining me. He's going to be my trusty little sidekick here for the rest of the show. So Kit, it's good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a heat wave, so I have to dress a little light. There's smog, so why not? Probably it's our corporate overlords trying to use bug repellent to get rid of us. And hey, we're living in a neoliberal nightmare. But it's always good to be back on the Jimmy Dore Show. So shout out to me. Shout out to the whole team at Jimmy Dore, for having me back on. People said, "Hey, kid, when are you going to be back on?" It's just timelines didn't match up. I'm working a couple different jobs here, and it's just another day in the USA, living the dream, which is the nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, you have to laugh sometimes because
of course
that's all we have. Okay, so let's talk about Trump's speech, shall we? Because Trump gave a speech last night and it was funny. So we're gonna pull this up here. So it says major breaking. President Trump says 220 million U.S. voter files were stolen by the People's Republic of China and says the intelligence was deliberately covered up by deep state actors within the U.S. government. And here's why that's funny. He's really doing China-gate, guys. His very own Russia-gate. We need new script writers. So unoriginal. I mean, this is insane, Kit. Here we go again. I mean, the reason why my Twitter handle is Comrade Misty is Putin's buddy is because of Russiagate. So now I'm wondering, how do you say comrade in Chinese and Mandarin? Like, do I need to change my name now? Because we're going to do Chinagate. Like, what is happening here? I think I actually have the think I have the clip here of him. Yep, I do here. Let's listen to what he had to say about China stealing all of our votes.
Oh, this should be lovely.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening. This data loss presents an unprecedented election security nightmare. The intelligence even shows that China assigned a data exploitation unit specifically to this new project. Compounding the travesty, the second set of documents we are releasing reveals that members of the deep state, very, very famous group of people, in many cases, in our intelligence agency work to actively suppress and downplay information about the extent of China's sinister election meddling, covering it up from both the president and the American people like nobody thought was possible.
Okay, well, there's a couple things to unpack here. Number one, when that teleprompter was being brought up, did the new guy do any Polymarket bets on the side? Number two, when you had the wonderful Whitney Webb on, I couldn't help but laugh because here's the thing. We are now in the Uno reverse card where Russiagate was a big thing and right-wingers and libertarians were being targeted and wrongly censored, which I was against. And now, oh no, it's Chinagate and somehow it's a deep state. Deep state, do they mean Mossad and the CIA being tag team champions again? Because when I think Chinagate, I'm thinking, was it Israel who did it or was it some other country? Because it's Russia, it's China, but yet AIPAC is the babysitter to all of Congress. I don't see any Russian or Chinese babysitters unless they were sponsored and sent in by AIPAC. So I think it's very clear here that this is just making it up as he goes along to cause another panic.
Well, and I also want to bring up a little something that obviously, if you know me, you know I'm about to bring this up. So in 2017, WikiLeaks released Vault 7, which if you're unfamiliar, Vault 7 was the largest CIA leak in history. And in those releases, there was a whole host of really terrifying stuff. The way that they're able to spy on you through your phone and your smart TV, and the way they're able to hack into your car, your automobile, all of that stuff. So just some real, if you haven't read it, you should, because it's crazy. But this is what I wanted to talk about in terms of Chinagate, because WikiLeaks reveals marble framework used by the CIA to make hard the attribution. So here's what this means. So WikiLeaks released the third batch of the CIA Vault 7 archive that sheds light on anti-forensics tools used by the intelligence agency. The first tranche of CIA documents from Vault 7 was related to hacking tools and techniques, while the second batch included detailed info about hacking tools specifically designed to hack smart TVs, Android handhelds, Apple iPhones, Macs, and Windows systems. This third lot of documents, dubbed Marble, includes the source code files for the anti-forensic Marble framework. It contains 676 source code files of a secret anti-forensic Marble framework. The experts from the CIA have developed the Marble framework to make hard forensics activities on its malicious codes. The code used by the CIA was able to evade detection, implementing various techniques. For example, it is able to detect if the code runs in virtual machine sandbox. The Marble platform, this is the crux. The Marble platform makes hard the attribution of the attacks. The documents show how CIA can conduct a cyber attack in a way experts attributed to other countries, including Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. So basically what they are saying is the CIA has the capability to enter into a computer. And listen, I am not a computer expert. So if I sound like an idiot, it's because I am. I don't know the terminologies and all of that stuff. But as a layperson, what I understand this to mean is that the CIA has the capability of entering into a computer system and inserting code that is in Russian or Chinese or Farsi, whatever they want, whatever language that they want, in order to make it appear as if it were a foreign actor. So I'm just putting that out there because we are now seeing these documents come out. We're seeing Trump talk about how there's all this evidence. There's all this evidence that China interfered. And I'm not saying, Kit, that China doesn't attempt to interfere with our elections. They absolutely do, as does every other major country on earth, right?
Everyone does, yes.
Everybody, nobody does it more than we do. No one on earth does it more than we do. And in fact,
we're the world heavyweight champions. We are the world heavyweight champions when it comes to this. And
yes.
One thing I want to add in here is that, look, I mean, I get it. Humans, we're tribal. We go against each other. We've been doing it since the dawn of time. We're experts at killing ourselves, and no species will ever take that away from us. But what I want everyone to take away from this is that when you are afraid of your neighbor, the other, and you have an institution that's been lying and getting us into these ridiculous wars over and over again, and then defending the corporations that need a bailout, one has to wonder, okay, are we really under attack? Because it wouldn't be the first time ever, not including America, a government weaponizing its intelligence services or perhaps an organization to undermine its own people, to hurt its own people, because when you have a self-aware society, they're going to want a government institutions to represent them and fight for their best values. As soon as people start wisening up and realizing, hey, we're not being represented because APAC is taking control, lobby groups, big oil, the prison industrial complex are taking over, and we're getting nothing, of course we're going to say, hey, why are you doing this to us? Is it Russia that's denying us healthcare? Is it China that's making sure our streets have potholes? Is it North Korea that's putting flock cameras all over our communities? And was it Canada hiding the Epstein files? No, we're doing this to ourselves, and our politicians that are supposed to represent us, they're the biggest backstabbers of them all. So it comes as no surprise that they would say, like, oh, well, it's China. Well, gee, everyone said the same thing about Russia, and that was one big nothing burger.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so frustrating about this is because this will play with a certain segment of the population. Trump supporters, MAGA supporters are absolutely going to, I mean, we've already seen it today online. Everybody's hyperventilating about China, and people are talking about we've got to revoke student visas and we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And it's just really frustrating to me because as you just mentioned, China is not preventing us from having healthcare. China hasn't entered us into illegal wars. China isn't aiding and funding a genocide. China isn't destroying our education system. I mean, I live in Ohio. My roads are nothing but potholes. Meanwhile, there are data centers popping up every which where. I mean, they want to tell us that we can't water our lawns and we need to shorten our showers, but we're going to build a gazillion data centers that are going to, take all of our clean water. I mean, it's absurd that we need to clean our own house first. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to clean our own house first. And again, as I just mentioned, nobody does this stuff more than the United States government. I have here James Woolsey, who I think he's ex-CIA director, and he's talking about the fact that the CIA interferes in elections. It's what we do.
You ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though. We don't mess around other people's elections, Jim?
Yes, we do.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on this former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks for being here. It's always great to see.
Interests of democracy, Kit. That's all.
Well, I want to point out something here. Let's talk about democracy. We're going to go back to 1950. There was this country called Iran. No one's ever heard of it. And there was this national government there. And, I'm giving just the short nitty gritty of it. They wanted to use the oil to uplift their people. Yes, no such thing as a perfect government. And, apparently British oil, American oil, CIA, British intelligence didn't like that, got the Shah, and then nothing bad happened. Oh, wait, the Ayatollah of rock and roll took over, and that's why we're in the spot that we are now, because we undermined a potential democracy in the Middle East, or actually in Iran, and that didn't cause any problems at all. Happy endings, sunshines, and rainbows, right? Oh, right. Wait, but then we did it over and over again in other countries, too. Do we want to talk about Vietnam? Do we want to talk about Ho Chi Minh?
I mean, we can talk about what's it's the Animaniacs GIF where they go through all of the countries and they're like, these are the countries that the United States has interfered in their elections, and it's everybody. It's literally everybody. It's what we do, and we always use the same excuse that he just used. Oh, we got to stop the communists. Oh, we got to protect democracy. It's never about that. It's always about overthrowing democratically elected leadership, installing puppet dictators, stealing resources, and controlling populations. That's what it is. Has nothing to do with democracy, has nothing to do with, the communists or whatever they want to sell you in order to make you afraid enough to be fine with it. That's absurd. That is absolutely absurd. It is crazy that anybody even believes that at this point, but they do. I mean, unfortunately, people still fall for this stuff.
I'd go on to something else here too, because maybe I have a new Twitter handle name for you. Because instead of Comrade Misty Putin's buddy, you could be like Xi Jinping. You know me, like from the old Dirty Bastards.
Seriously, I need to figure out how do you say comrade in Chinese? Anybody know? I can change my handle today.
Folks,
At one point, I did
section.
when we did the Venezuela thing a few years ago. I did change it to Comrade Misty as Maduro's amiga for a little while, but then we instantly went back to blaming Russia for everything. So I just changed it back. So
and then we arrested Maduro, and whatever happened there.
Arrested, we kidnapped. Let's just be honest. So this is just to finish up this article here. It says today, March 31st, 2017, WikiLeaks releases Vault 7 Marble's 676 source code files for the CIA's secret anti-forensic Marble framework. Marble is used to hamper forensic investigators and antivirus companies from attributing viruses, Trojans, and hacking attacks to the CIA. Marble does this by hiding, obfuscating text fragments used in CIA malware from visual inspection. This is the digital equivalent of a specialized CIA tool to place covers over the English language text on US-produced weapon systems before giving them to insurgents secretly backed by the CIA. Again, this is just explaining that this is the tool that they use to go in and insert foreign languages to make it appear as if it was a foreign actor, when really it's just CIA messing with our own stuff. And I'm not saying that that's what happened here. I'm just saying that I just want you to know this is possible. WikiLeaks revealed this in 2017. And again, as I always try to do when I talk about Julian Assange and Vault 7, this was March of 2017. Julian Assange was already years into illegal and arbitrary detention in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He was already public enemy #1 of the world's largest empire, and he released the largest CIA leak in history. And I wish I had balls that big. I'm just saying.
What happened to him was not only criminal, but it was a sign of just how corrupt our institutions were and how our media, at least until the very end, when they said, "Oh yeah, him being detained, it was kind of a bad thing." Only at the end did they show, and I'm being generous here because I know Misty.
After me badgering them for years.
Are you kidding me? You're the world heavyweight champion. That's why I call you one of the dauntless few for actually speaking up for Julian Assange. You've been there since day one, dealing with everything, and now everyone's like, "Huh, that was very bad at what happened."
Maybe that was a bad thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and the thing is, it set a precedent for online censorship. It set a precedent for a lot of our colleagues in independent media that have lost so much attention. I mean, it's the jackboot of censorship that we are dealing with now. And unfortunately, a lot of people will eat up the fact, oh, it's Russia attacking us. Oh, it's China attacking us. It's
us attacking us.
Did we also forget, like, this is the same U.S. government now that's telling us that aliens, UFOs, and interdimensional beings are now real. So everyone's coming at us, but it all seems made up. Seems like it's one big distraction for the fact of our government's been hiding association with the most prolific human trafficker in international history, one named Jeffrey Epstein, and his wonderful partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's in Club Fed.
Yeah. Well, there you go, guys. China is hacking into our elections. All right. And speaking of Epstein, we're going to move on. So again, thank you so much for tuning in to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm your guest host, Misty Winston, and that's my pal Kit. He's my plucky sidekick. Whatever. You guys know I can't talk. This is not new information. I talk too fast and my brain works faster than my mouth does. And that doesn't always work out for me. So I did want to talk about Epstein, though, because as everybody I'm sure is fully well aware, JD Vance, Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, couch connoisseur, JD Vance, went on Joe Rogan, and he had a lot of interesting things to say. I think Jimmy talked about some of what he had to say, maybe about Iran. But I wanted to talk about the Epstein pieces that were in here, because I think that this, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of distractions going on, and not a single person has been arrested on the Epstein files yet. And that is a very frustrating thing to me, that there is a mountain of evidence supporting the existence of a global child sex trafficking ring that implicates people at extreme levels of power and influence, and nobody is going to be arrested for that. And that is a very disturbing fact. And is just really depressing to me. So JD Vance went on Joe Rogan, and here's a piece where they're talking about Epstein being Mossad or CIA, and I thought that this was super interesting, especially in contrast to what Carolyn Leavitt had to say. Leavitt? I always say her name wrong. Let me make sure I'm getting the right clip. I have too many of them up. Is this one? Oh,
Let's try to get me to meet him.
Nope, wrong one. Sorry. Oh, I should have marked these better. My apologies.
It's all good. Just remember, folks.
People think he was Mossad.
Yeah, Mossad or CIA or some other deep state, whether in America or Israel or another country, or both. Look, he clearly had connections to the highest levels of American intelligence. He clearly had connections to the highest levels of Israeli intelligence.
Duh.
Yeah, of course. The files showed that he knew everybody from Hollywood bigwigs, music producers, doctors, scientists, Wall Street executives, big bankers, royalty, ministers, senators, and Democrat and Republican politicians, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump. Whoa, where'd that come from?
Right. And again, I think as you were just saying, I highly please go watch the full thing for yourself. It's obviously very long. It's a Joe Rogan episode, but I don't want you to take these clips and think that I'm like trying to frame things a certain way. Go watch it for yourself, inform yourself about what he actually had to say about all of this stuff. I think that that's important, obviously. But I just thought that clip was super interesting because there you have JD Vance admitting that, yes, this guy had ties to high level Israeli and American intelligence. Like that's not even up for debate. It's not even something that anybody, I think, would even attempt to contradict. But then you have, here we go. It's just a hoax, guys.
If you look at how this Epstein story sort of evolved over the past week, it's classic Washington hoax.
Yes.
You have Democrats on the Oversight Committee leaking redacted information to their favorite reporter at CNN, who then pops the story with that redacted information and does not reveal that the unredacted version is available. And the unredacted version proves that the so-called victim in this email is a woman who is unfortunately deceased, but prior to her death said on numerous occasions that President Trump never did anything wrong and was always incredibly friendly in her.
Incredibly friendly, guys.
Oh, buddies and pals all around. Here's the real breakdown. There have been so many women who reported that Ghislaine Maxwell was far worse than Epstein, and that's saying much. There have been victims who have died, deceased under mysterious circumstances when they gave no indication that they would partake in self-deletion. Got to be careful because of guidelines. I guess you have to be careful here and there, unfortunately. Hey, we're a free society. And speaking of a free society, how is it that this is the same Jeffrey Epstein who had blackmail material on the richest people in the world? One can make an argument that he probably never paid a bill because he had his people, his billionaire friends, looking like at Bill Gates, for example, maybe flip the bill for some of his stuff. I mean, you don't just have mansions and huge, nice New York apartment buildings or London. Look, that stuff isn't cheap, folks.
No.
High-rise places like that don't buy themselves. They don't knock on your door and say, like, hey, I bought myself just for you. We don't live in that world. It'll be a great world, but we don't. And so, in turn, who gave him the money? How did he get this money? How is he able to fund this kind of lifestyle? It's because he has the know-how and the connections with people in power. Look at New Mexico with the Zorro Ranch.
Yes.
What he was allowed to get away with over there. Boy, I would have loved to have some flock cameras there to capture in real time what happened to the bodies or who was going on to that ranch.
Yeah. Well, and then again, I mean, we just had Whitney Webb on that. Everybody go read Whitney's work on Jeffrey Epstein, One Nation Under Blackmail. She goes into, and Epstein's history is weird. Like, it's just crazy. Like, he was given a teaching job. He's not a teacher. Like, all of the things that he was allowed to do, get away with, all of that stuff. I mean, it's very obvious to me that he was an asset of definitely the United States and certainly Israel. I just don't think that's up for debate. But the idea that they're still trying to use the hoax line for any aspect of this story. And it's also very frustrating to me that they're trying to essentially victim blame and say, and I've heard her do it. I think Vance also did it in the Rogan episode. I'm not sure if I pulled that clip or not, but he talks about how the redaction process was difficult because some of these women who were initially victims then became perpetrators, but they're still victims. Like they are, even if they were brought in, once you're brought into that situation, you are then fearful for your life and you kind of just have to do whatever you have to do to survive. And so were they also recruiting girls and all of that? Yes. for sure. But they didn't have much choice. And the idea that they're trying to victim blame them and act as if they are now the bad guy that we need to be in, it just makes me very angry when they do that stuff.
I would actually go even further because look, with somebody like Epstein, you just don't know what he will do. And, you know, it's again, some of the women that partook in this or other people, perhaps it's acting rational in an irrational situation to where you see this one person have influence over local, state, federal politicians, judges, police officers, sheriffs, and no one's touching him. You could get the menace of fear there. And I find it interesting that you have the same Trump administration now saying or indicating that there's hoaxes or that there's some fake news, when I could just rewind back the clocks to 2019 when all this started, and a lot of conservative right-wing channels were talking about this. Yes, people on the left were talking about it too, but a lot of people made their bones, got all the figgy pudding, all the viewership, all the subscribers, all the donations, talking about the Epstein files. And as soon as Trump got reelected, they got the memo to shut up. And then, of course, how can we remember or forget the infamous right-wing influencers jumping up and down with the binders on the White House? If I was there, I would be so embarrassed that people be jumping up and down because that's a somber moment. But no, because that was all for show.
Yeah.
And now that Trump is in and saying that nothing happened until what happened in February of this year, all of that came crashing down. All became revealed. And that was just a drop in the bucket. You know, I'm talking about the Epstein files. It wasn't too long ago where I even mentioned that Epstein had his own tribe of doctors, his own group of doctors that would oversee women that were in his services. I mean, he kept a lot of people.
There were many forced abortions and reproductive health care, birth control, pap smears, all of those things, I'm sure, were handled because he can't have them going to a regular doctor. They might tell somebody, you know what I'm saying? So
exactly,
there's no question. He had a whole host of people working under him, with him, for him, beside him, all of that. And that's what's so frustrating. There's plenty of evidence to support this stuff. And not a single person other than Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail. Not a single person is in jail. And that is just, it blows my mind. You would think
I would really in jail. She's at Club Fed, which is like for white collar criminals. And when you have those same white collar criminals,
she's on vacation basically,
saying, hey, we don't want her here. You know, that because that's what they said. Like, you had all these white collar criminals saying, like, what are you bringing her here for? We don't want her. And they let her on in.
Yeah, it's despicable. But okay, so there's another clip here that I wanted to talk about. So, and it talks a little bit about what you were just mentioning with the binders. So the purpose of because that was all so very performative and stupid and embarrassing. And again, I will say it again. Anybody who was involved with those shenanigans, why do you still have a platform? Not saying that they should be silenced or censored, but why is anybody watching them? They should have zero credibility left with the American public. That was such a disgusting display that I can't even, I don't even have words, or I'm not even able to fully comprehend how just vile that was. So let's take a listen to what he has to say about that performative display that they put on there.
Again, say this with all candor, we absolutely screwed up the comms of the Epstein files, like we just did. But do I think the reason we screwed up the comms is because we were trying to hide something? No. I think the reason we screwed up the comms of the Epstein files is one, Pam Bondi said the client list is on my desk, right?
Well, they had binders. They were standing in front.
But those binders were largely documents that had already been released, right? So let me try to.
Well, what was the
defend.
purpose of that performative display of the Epstein files? And she was saying there's tens of thousands of hours of film.
I don't know what the purpose of it was, but I know that the effect of it was to make people mistrust the entire effort. And what I think was happening, look, I know Pam, I like Pam. I don't think there was anything malicious going on. I think Pam was trying to respond to the political moment. I think she overstated what we had and what we didn't have. And I think that she, got roasted for it publicly by a lot of people, including me.
They're throwing Pam Bondi under the bus on that one.
The Dow is over 50. Yes. But what about the victims? But the Dow Jones. No, first of all, I remember early on, Trump was applauding how she handled herself until, he read the rooms like, okay, well, we need a sacrificial lamb. That was an absolute embarrassment and an insult to the victims that were standing right behind her. Because when Trump got elected, he made promises to be transparent. He did talk about the Epstein files, but when it came push to shove, he was forced by Representative Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. And Massie, I think, in my opinion, is the only person who's been punished. He lost his seat.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to like him on all of his other policies, but of all the people, gee, that's the guy that loses his seat. That's the guy who loses his election in Kentucky.
They spent, what, $30 million? Israel and AIPAC spent $30 million on seating him in Kentucky.
Kentucky, you got a guy from Chicago. We got corrupt politicians here. We got a history of questionable elections. But I got to tell you, Kentucky, you guys could have done better.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Yes. And that whole display was genuinely disgusting. And the idea, I mean, I think it was a Libs of TikTok lady. I can't remember her name, Shaya or whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever. But she was literally like bouncing around, smiling, holding this binder up that is supposed to be filled with evidence of child sex abuse. And why are you smiling, ma'am? Like, what are you doing? The absolute, just complete lack of awareness of the moment. It's crazy.
I have my own theory, and probably, there's others that have maybe a more better explanation. But for those who reach the peak of influence, where you get millions of subscribers, millions of views, you lose your ability to understand human emotions, and you're just only focused on the camera and the likes and the views and the admiration from diehard followers. Because humans, sadly, are creatures of habit. So you asked early on, like, why people still follow them. It's because it's what keeps them comfortable, and they're not going to think ahead, when in fact what you want from an audience is to critically challenge you, give you constructive criticism and feedback. You don't want to be surrounded by ARPing seals. You want people to be
some people do want to be surrounded by
but see those, and see those people don't add anything to the conversation. What they want is to be seen, have the lights and camera on them. The whole goal of independent media is to get everyone who's watching this show right now, and all independent media, to be actively involved and to actually stand up and realize that the two-party system was owned not only by people like Epstein, but others that are leading into these pointless wars. And just because Epstein is gone, air quote, I have my suspicions.
Right.
But that's it. I'm leaving it there because I love Jimmy and everybody else. And then you have Miss Maxwell in jail. But you're going to look me in the eye and tell me that the Epstein network is gone? No, it's either being rebuilt or somebody or people.
And he wasn't the only one. Like there are more Epsteins out there. He was just one piece of that puzzle. I mean, we saw like the Diddy stuff. Diddy was the Epstein of Hollywood, right? Like there's multiple layers to this, and people are just assuming that because Epstein is gone that it's over, and it's just not, and it's going to keep continuing. So here's where he kind of admits that yes, they did screw it up, which no kidding, no shit, Sherlock. I guess.
I want to say we mishandled the Epstein release. Guilty. We did mishandle, especially the communications of it.
What do you think should have been done?
I think that we should have just dropped everything at the very beginning. And like, obviously it takes a little time to review the stuff, to find the stuff, to redact things where you have victims and so forth. But we should have just done it as quickly as possible.
But some of the stuff that was redacted, some of the names that were redacted weren't victims.
So yeah, I've looked into this, and my understanding of this, having looked at a lot of this, but not all of it, is that it is sometimes hard to draw a distinction between victim and co-conspirator. And like, let me highlight this in a very sort of obvious way. Ro Khanna, who's been one of the loudest voices on the Epstein file. Well, he became very loud on the Epstein files the minute Donald Trump became president. Didn't seem to care about it during the Biden administration. He actually brought one of the Epstein victims, I think, to the State of the Union last year, or maybe it was the year before last. Well, like that victim, and I'm not saying she wasn't a victim. I don't know anything about her particular case. She was also listed as a co-conspirator in some of these documents, right? So there's an idea that some of the people who were engaged in the sex trafficking were also, facilitating it as well.
So they were incentivized to get more girls.
Yeah, but yes, that's right. But the idea is that it's hard to sort of, it's sometimes a little bit of a gray area between, some of the people who were alleged victims were also alleged co-conspirators, and so what DOJ tried to do was kind of make that judgment as best they could and release as much as possible.
They could have had WikiLeaks do it. They're pretty good at redactions. I'm just saying.
And not to mention, hey, at this point, drop it, because we know just how sociopathic our rich overlords are. I mean, they're more than happy to spy in on us, which again, these flock cameras, 90,000 of them have been proven to be hackable. And at least one YouTuber, I covered this in March,
Yeah.
Can you imagine either some Epstein or Epstein kind of douchebags, looking at those cameras, looking at playgrounds, looking at parks and schools?
We know that's happening.
Those are your kids, everyone that's watching. We got a lot of people watching. So everyone in the chat, maybe this should send a shiver down the back of your neck or something like that. But think about it. Your family, your friends, your granddaughters, grandsons, sons, daughters, nephews, nieces can all be susceptible to this system. And no one in any position of authority stopped Epstein. They knew about him.
Yes.
And I'm not going to believe that these rich people, these billionaires who are all buddy with him, are going to say, oh, well, we didn't know. You were in the top echelon of society. You're playing your Game of Thrones. You're telling me you're not keeping an eye on so-and-so over there or that person. You're not going to have your little assistants giving you updates, giving you notes, because that's how these rich people play games with each other. They blackmail each other. They know each other. And Epstein was a masterclass tactician when it came down to that. And I hate even saying that, I'm vomiting in my brain, even giving him that praise, but he had everything on everyone and no one lifted a finger. And now I'm supposed to believe that you just can't unleash other files about Epstein. This is the biggest story ever. And right now we're being distracted by wars and other BS, aliens and all this other crap, when in fact we need full transparency, because our republic has a sick virus in it. And the people that are associated with Epstein and all of his ilk need to be exposed and held accountable. But wait, I forget we're in America, so they're going to get away with it.
Yeah, they are going to get away with it. And that's what it's so disturbing to me as a mother to know that the people who are in positions of power and authority are absolute sick and twisted psychopaths. Like, just the most vile and repugnant human beings on earth. And even if you weren't directly involved in the things that Jeffrey Epstein was doing, you knew, and you did nothing. You said nothing. It's just beyond my. And listen, we're going to play a clip right now. Joe Rogan was able to suss this stuff out. Joe Rogan was able to figure out that Jeffrey Epstein was a creep. That's weird that Joe Rogan, podcaster, meathead, like, he was able to figure it out, but the people in positions of power and authority who went to fancy colleges and hold fancy degrees and have these big titles, you couldn't figure it out. So here we go.
Yeah.
When?
2017.
See, that's crazy to me, because at that point he'd already gone down for at least one sex abuse thing.
That was my position. I'll show you the emails.
Okay.
They're kind of funny.
Which
I
guest?
actually read them on stage.
You want to say? Okay, fine.
People can find it.
Yeah.
I don't want to have the guy's already ruined.
Sure. But
dude, I Googled it and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Just a simple little Google search. That's all it took for Joe Rogan to figure out that Jeffrey Epstein is a creep.
Yeah. And the thing is, what's interesting is how Epstein was trying to, or at least somebody was trying to at least allegedly get him on Rogan's show or something, and Rogan wouldn't play ball, which is fantastic.
He just wanted to hook them up. Like there was a guest on his show
Right.
that he was like, hey, let me hook you up with this guy, Jeffrey Epstein. He's like a financier. He does all this stuff, whatever. And Joe Rogan did his due diligence and was like, let me Google this guy, and was like, oh yeah, no.
Yeah,
no
way.
Thank you.
Exactly. And that's it comes with the job, because, and I do find Vance's, I guess, how he's presenting himself. He looks annoyed because he thought he was coming to a safe place. Now, Rogan, I question some of his things, especially when he was recently in Trump's White House for I forget, some sort of medicine for those dealing with psychosis or something of that issue. I have to look back in it, but it's like, Rogan, you're being used by this administration. You need to start thinking ahead, because these guys are not going to give you a clear answer. Trump had to have his arm twisted to have that whole dump of Epstein files be released in February of this year. He had to have his arm twisted. He was forced to it. If Trump had a choice, he probably never would have released it. And dare I say it, controversial statement here, let's say if Biden or Kamala won, they would not be talking about this either. The only reason why we got Democrats talking about it is because it's a good political chip for them to use for the midterm.
I think Thomas Massey would have talked about it regardless.
Yes.
He's been pretty consistent. He's really the only one who's been consistent. But in that clip earlier where JD Vance threw some shade at Ro Khanna and said that he was pretty quiet during Biden, that's valid criticism. That is true. Democrats didn't say anything about this during the Biden administration. So that's just another one of those lines of hypocrisy where suddenly you care about something because the guy in control is no longer on your team. And it's just really repugnant that anybody would ignore child sex abuse on a global scale like this. It's beyond my ability to comprehend. But yeah, that is valid criticism of Ro Khanna. And I think Thomas Massie is really, to my knowledge, the only person who has held elected office throughout the course of all these shenanigans, who has been consistent on this issue. And listen, I have my issues with Thomas Massie, don't get me wrong, but on this, he has been loud and consistent. And I mean, credit where it's due, I guess.
And more importantly, too, when we talk about consistency, will these same politicians, now that Massie will be gone, will they give the same fire and fury talking about the Epstein files? Because this is our big scandal. You know, we are the Roman Empire of the modern era. We are the top dog, at least until like all empires, they die violently because it's a violent phenomenon. But if we as citizens want to show the world, like, hey, we're not for this, then we need to be self-aware. When you vote Democrat, when you vote Republican, you're voting for two parties that had people in it that turned a blind eye to Epstein's actions. And you think your vote matters? You think that person sitting in D.C. is going to think about you? Look, just New Mexico, Zorro Ranch.
Yeah.
Every echelon of power and authority and legal representation did nothing to stop Epstein and the activities on the Zorro Ranch. You're going to tell me that all of that was like, oh, they just didn't know? Oh, they couldn't do, their hands were tied? See, Hollywood likes to lie to us. TV shows like to lie to us that, oh, something bad, people will step up. No, that's not the case. The game is, I got money, you look the other way. I got money and I will cause you problems. I got a super lawyer and I will drag you and bury you, which is why, again, I'm always going to say this, you know, if we want real change, we got to start stepping up our own actions and not rely on DC. Massie, a rarity. Yeah. If you expect DC to represent you and fight for you, you got another thing coming. If you think the story has a happy ending, you're not paying attention.
That's a level of naivete that I don't even understand at all. The idea that anybody in Washington, D.C. gives not at all about you.
Wait.
You're not even a consideration.
They care about their jobs. So a politician like AOC, 2 years down the road, 4 years down the road, 8 years down the road, they care about their jobs.
Well, yeah, they care. It's whatever's politically advantageous to them at the time. It has nothing to do with you. You do not matter. They will pander to you. But their actions are never going to be based on what you want, what you need, what is most important to you. It is always going to be based on how can they keep their job, how can they please their donors. That is it. They're not in the business of helping people or serving people. That's not what they do. It's not at all what they do. Okay. Let's move on because now we're all terrorists, Kit. Okay, so again, thank you for tuning in to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm your guest host for today, Misty Winston. That's Kit Cabello. He's from Hardlands Media. He is joining me today as my plucky sidekick. I'm so happy to have him here. So listen, Kit, did you know that we're all terrorists on the left? Everybody on the left is just a terrorist. So
we did it.
Stephen Miller, this guy is like a Bond villain. He is like a quintessential. I'm not sure if there's a more evil guy. I mean, I don't know. There's some pretty evil people, but he just, like, his presentation is even evil. It's fascinating. So Stephen Miller says, quote, "Here in the United States, we have taken the necessary and essential action formally recognizing left-wing violence as a form of political terrorism that is a direct threat to our national security and the survival of our Republican form of government." So don't believe me? Here, I'm going to let you hear it from his own mouth.
In the States, we have taken the necessary and essential action of formally recognizing left-wing violence as a form of political terrorism that is a direct threat to our national security and the survival of our Republican form of government. President Trump issued a directive, in our parlance, it's called a National Security Presidential Memorandum, or NSPM, NSPM 7 to be exact, that directs for the first time in American history all of our law enforcement and intelligence agencies to work together to disrupt, identify, defund, debank, arrest, and prosecute these political terrorists that are operating in our country. It's very important to understand that left-wing political terrorism seeks as its ultimate end the overthrow of our system and form of government. And we've seen this has taken place many times in many places throughout the years, and Secretary Rubio has provided you many examples. Left-wing terrorism always ends in bloodshed, misery, and suffering. It only can travel in one direction. There's no point at which the left-wing terrorist is satisfied with his gains and ceases progressing. Inevitably, left to run its course, it always becomes a gulag. It always becomes the mass imprisonment of political enemies, the stripping of their rights and freedoms, inflicting immense pain, humiliation, suffering, in order to establish complete and total control. Control through psychological and physical and actual terror. And we have to understand that that is the scope and the extent of the threat that we face. Here in the
he just described himself, kid.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're doing.
Fascist says what?
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple things to unpack here. First of all, let's talk about left-wing violence. Okay. Now, there's violence everywhere. I get it, folks. But I think things are getting so hypercharged and being exploded and being taken out of context due to the fact of AI, social media, and people being stuck in the tribal mindset of hating each other. Okay, first of all, that's the job of politicians, to make everyone hate each other. Because if we got along, we'd have to hold them accountable, and then they'd have to do their job, which is an anathema to them. Second, I have seen many of these protests here in Chicago, okay? I want to talk about the Labor Day protest in 2025. This was before ICE started really coming in here in Chicago when they were doing the ICE raids. That was not a peak army in physically fit condition, okay? Misty, if you and I went there, we'd probably swing on 30 people before they finally start obeying and getting on their knees listening to us, okay? It'd be the world's most one-sided fist fight. They were not ready for anything. And they keep on protesting and dancing in front of Trump Tower. I want to talk about the glorified parade. Shout out to my friend Nick Thompson, who came up with that phrase of the No Kings protest, okay? Nick would call them glorified parades. It was what they are. You have people wearing their pink pussy hats. That's not terrorism. That's just people trying to think that, oh, we resist Trump in one day and he'll step down. Anyone lame enough to show up would show up to that, all right? I wouldn't associate, because that's what? Click, 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 click. You've been caught in by the double state two-party system cameras. Also now talking about left-wing terrorism. Are we going to talk about right-wing terrorism? Because this seems like how the Biden-Harris administration was going after right-wing influencers, people who are libertarians, anybody else way back during the Biden-Harris administration, and I was against that. I didn't want to see people on the right getting censored and suppressed. I don't want to see that happen to libertarians. No. But yet now automatically, because when Biden was saying, oh yeah, there's Trump supporters and right-wing violence, I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to come after us all. Because as soon as I hear that, once the Democrats come in control, once Republicans come in control, they are going to use that same template to use against against all of us. So one side will speak, then the other side will speak. But these will be people who will be approved, corporatized to speak. Anyone else that's in independent media in our sphere, we become public enemy number one. And anyone that eats up that slop from the politicians, imagine if that was Biden or Kamala giving you that diary information. There'd be a lot of libtards drinking that up. And now you got people on the Trump side, Republican side, eating it up here too. But wake up to reality. That's going to be used against you too. And then you'd be captured on your flock camera and be arrested too. Or we could be like Britain and be arrested for a Facebook post 10 years ago or 14 years ago. Yeah. Because that's a free society. Always be careful. Big Brother's watching. 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World. Those were warnings, not a manual.
Yeah. And listen, they've been setting this up for a very long time. There has been they're not stupid. They know that if they do these types of things overnight, that people would, obviously speak out against it. We would rail against it. We would be like, no, absolutely not. We're not doing this. But they have effectively, over the course of many, many years, created an environment and in a political atmosphere where we don't trust each other, where we're very divided, where we hate our neighbors, and where we're willing to excuse and justify terrible things happening to people that we don't agree with. And they've been so effective in that. We talked about it briefly with Whitney and Mark earlier, where, like the Black Lives Matter protesters, the right couldn't have been happier when they started getting beaten up and all that stuff. And then vice versa, the Black Lives Matter protesters couldn't have been happier when January 6 protesters were getting beaten up and brutalized. And they don't even recognize, they don't even have the ability to comprehend, to step away from their preconceived biases, that this is exactly how they do it. They created a situation with Black Lives Matter where they make the right, look at these people, they're out here burning down their cities, and suddenly magical pallets full of bricks show up in the streets and all of that stuff, and there's agitators and there's infiltrators and all of that. And the same exact thing happened on January 6th. This is exactly how they do it. They work you against each other, and they create an environment where you're willing to forego your principles because you want the other guy to get it. And that's it's so beyond my ability to comprehend that people can't see it at this point, because it is so just readily apparent that that is the game plan. And they're just
Go. No. You're right, and I hope I don't instigate the chat or anybody else getting upset about this. But when Charlie Kirk died, I was devastated. I was doing a live stream, and I had one of my viewers, Dr. Nick, give me a heads up, like, hey, I'm not joking here. But Charlie Kirk just got shot, and I for one was like, oh crap, this is the worst thing that could happen, because I'm thinking
it's terrible.
If he dies, the ramping up of censorship is going to happen, and then this is going to be weaponized to make one side hate the other. All right, and it's been effective. It's been very effective. But I say to anyone that's on the right and left, if you're just average, you're in on this, think long and hard. Okay, think about this. This is the same playbook we've seen before, where you see one side saying the left is the agitators. Then once the left comes to power, or liberals come into power, you got, oh yeah, the right are the agitators. The real agitators are the neoliberal centrists enjoying their brunch while the rest of us starve.
Yes.
These are the people that have led us into foreign wars, bankrupt our country. We're exposed to lead in our drinking water. We got other contaminants that we have to deal with. And yet somehow we're supposed to make it day in, day out, make ends meet. But then to keep us bitter, I have to hate my neighbor. I have to hate my family at Thanksgiving. That is not how it should work and function. And the job of independent media is to show, hey, these people in DC, these people who represent you, are they representing you? Because 99% of the time they're on the phone call listening to their donors, or they're getting marching orders to have them hate each other, because it's a script. When you see the Democrat Republican politicians arguing, it's like something from ECW or WCW or WWF.
It's a soap opera featuring psychopaths. That's what it is. It's all manufactured and ridiculous. It's a show. It's always been a show. And you're so right. And I've been saying this for years, and I can't tell you how often I get trashed for saying this, but your neighbor is not your enemy. I promise you. The MAGA guy that lives down the road, if you're on the left, not your enemy. The lefty that lives down the road, if you're MAGA, not the enemy. I promise you. We have common enemies, and they wear very expensive suits and sit in boardrooms and make decisions that impact your life. I can promise you that the people who live in your neighborhood are not your enemy. They are suffering the same oppression that you are. And they've just done a very good job of manipulating you and convincing you that you have to blame each other rather than blaming the people in actual power, who have actual power to impact your life. And that's what's so frustrating about this. And you bring up Charlie Kirk. I can't tell you how disappointing it was for me to watch people who had fought alongside me in the fight for Julian Assange's freedom, cheering for the death of a man for saying words that they didn't like. Like, he said words that they didn't like. And so they cheered his assassination. I blew my mind. These are people who I thought were like allies, like people who actually got it, who were legit. I have really learned over the years that finding somebody who is genuinely free speech is like finding a unicorn. They're very few and far between.
Look, I believe in free speech because I have been a victim of censorship. I know firsthand about the jackboot censorship. It sucks. But, at the end of the day, when you are being suppressed, you got to look for people who do believe in it. And I remember getting started here, especially with independent media. You had I guess the typical troll would be like someone from the right saying, oh, you're a communist, you're a communist, you're a communist. And then later on, when the Biden-Harris administration got in,
then you're MAGA.
Then I'm somehow MAGA. And then I remember getting this one message from a Trump supporter saying, hey, how come these liberals and communists hate you? Aren't you guys friends? And I'm like, no, buddy. No,
they hate me too. Everybody hates me. All sides hate me.
Yeah,
I feel like that's how you know you're doing it right. Because if everybody hates you, then that means you've just stayed consistent. Exactly. And you're not pandering to anybody. And I feel like that's when you know you're in a pretty good spot. So this douche canoe, Stephen Miller, mentioned Marco Rubio. I do want to play Marco Rubio's comments too, because I think those are very telling. But also, before I forget really quickly, Stephen Miller was saying there that we're going to debank and blah, blah, blah. Social credit system, anybody? If you go against the grain, they're going to just take away your ability to bank, and they're going to take away your ability to live in society. And I'm just saying that's what we're moving towards.
I'm going to say one thing. Look, what these politicians fail to realize is when you create an environment where nobody gives a single F, and like they're not afraid anymore, and they got nothing but hatred and they don't care, don't be surprised what a desperate person will do.
Yeah.
All right. Because if there's no consequences and they know that, hey, well, it's all over for me now.
Yeah.
What can I do to take a big old sloppy dump in your hat and have you put it on? Because that's what you'll create an army. You'll create a world of desperation. And these politicians and all their AI, I mean, as Mark Antony once said, Snows do melt and rivers do dry.
Yep. True story. Okay, here's Marco Rubio, just so you guys can hear what he had to say about this whole thing.
Face a new wave of this old evil. Here in the United States, the share of left-wing terrorist attacks and plots has risen to levels not seen in decades.
Oh, wow.
In Germany, far-left violence has jumped by more than 40% in just the last year alone. In Greece, more than 80% of radical violence is now driven by far-left and anarchist actors. These are not abstract statistics. Americans have seen what those numbers mean. An all-out assault on our immigration officers, sniper attacks, explosives, armed ambushes, a transgender shooter opening fire on Catholic elementary school students as they pray, his gun marked with slogans like, "Where is your God now?" A healthcare executive executed in cold blood in the streets. Multiple assassination attempts on a sitting president, and the murder of the greatest conservative activist of a generation, a man who happened to also be a husband and the father of 2 young children, shot and killed while speaking to a crowd of students. This is a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by a hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. It is a revolt of the worst against the best, a revolt of the weak and the cowardly against the strong and the good. It is perpetrated by those who cannot build, who cannot create, who cannot achieve great things, and take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy by seeking to destroy those who can.
What a turd, dude. He's such a listen, a lot of that stuff he just made up. Like, first of all, who defines what is left-wing violence? I want to know what the definition of that is. What does it take to qualify for that? And why do these particular occasions that he is claiming that have happened in Greece and Egypt and wherever else he mentioned, how? I want to know what those statistics actually are. I want to know what those qualifications are. I want to know what the definition is. He's just making shit up to scare people. He's fear mongering so that people will be on board with what they intend to do, which is to, Stephen Miller talked about the gulag. That's exactly what he wants to do. He wants to set up a gulag for left-wing people that do not agree with him. You have different opinions than I do, straight to the gulag. The hypocrisy is insane. It's nuts.
I'd also add on here too, you have talk about Trump's assassination. Well, as a former Marine, I have to say the people who did the site security around that area were not guarding the rooftops or any high elevated positions.
Right?
I mean, how'd you turn a blind eye to that? For the site security for Charlie Kirk, again, I find the actions of not having people on the rooftops of the buildings to ensure no one had easy access there because he's a high-profile person. And yes, he's probably received more than a handful of threats to his life, but the fact that no one even factored that in there should be drawn in there. So, look, and again, I say this as someone on the left, Charlie Kirk dying, to me, is a very, very bad freaking thing, and I wish it never happened because there's an after effect. We have politicians now using him as a scapegoat, be like, well, it's left-wing terrorism now that we got to worry about. Well, in fact, you know what's real terrorism? These politicians protecting the ghost, air quote, of one Epstein, of one Jeffrey Epstein, not holding anyone who was rich and powerful who partook in that perversive actions that he helped facilitate being held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. That needs to be addressed. That's real terrorism. When our government doesn't do anything to arrest people who committed crimes.
Yes. And let's not pretend that our government is above creating false flag situations in order to drive their agenda. And I'm not saying that any of these that he mentioned are false flags. Don't come for me. I don't know enough we never will know enough. I think it's likely that at least one or two of these things that has happened, whether it's the transgender shooters or whatever, there's an element of false flaggery going on there. I don't think there's any question about it. But let's not pretend like they're not, that they're somehow above that and that they're not doing that. They absolutely are. They're pushing an agenda and they're going to do it in any manner that they see fit and necessary. So yes, that is. And I just wanted to point out too, our good pal Caitlin Johnstone posted this and she's correct. They're building a new COINTELPRO, and it will not be dismantled when there's a Democrat in the White House. And she is correct. That is exactly what's happening here, and it's going to come for everybody. So if you're somebody on the right who is right now, and I've seen so many people in the comments of these posts like, yes, you need to arrest people. Like, this is all talk. We want to see action. It's coming for you too. I just hope that you realize that. You can cheer it on now while it's happening to people you don't agree with. But when it comes back for you, I'm going to say I told you so if I'm not already in a gulag. But it's coming for you too. It is absolutely coming for you too.
Here's what I'm going to say. Like, damn, they got you too? Who'd have thunk it, man?
Listen, I hope we end up in the same re-education camp, Kit. Hopefully they'll put us in the same one so we can at least hang.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. They're going to be arresting everybody, or better yet, it's going to be one big open air system where flock cameras are on us. We got to think happy thoughts all the time, like, oh, how happy things are. Everything's nice. Oh no, the whole world's on fire. How lovely. Don't wait up, people who are cheering for this. They'll get you soon enough.
They will.
And then guess what? There'll be Oz rules now, and you'll be the new fish in the gulag. Hey, we'll be there. We'll be running stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Give me my cigarettes.
Oh goodness. Okay. All right. Let's move on. So here's a fun story. And again, thank you everybody for tuning into the Jimmy Dore Show. I am your guest host for today, Misty Winston. That is Kit Cabello. He's my pal. You can check him out on Hardlands Media. Please go subscribe, share, support, all the things.
Yes. Thank you.
Please support independent media. It is more important now than ever. So let's talk about, because you guys know I'm in Ohio, and every time I come to the Jimmy Dore Show, I have to bring at least one Ohio story. So what I do. So Vivek Ramaswamy. This guy is the bane of my existence.
He's your buddy. He's your buddy. Your buddy.
No.
Your buddy and pal all around.
No, sir. But Vivek Ramaswamy, so this was just released. A super PAC supporting Vivek Ramaswamy just reported $12.24 million in quarter two fundraising, with almost all of it from billionaires: Elon Musk, Ratmir Timoshev, I'm probably mispronouncing that, sorry, $5 million each; Bill Ackman, good friend of the show, Bill Ackman, and Ross Stevens, $1 million each. It's the first time any of them have donated to the super PAC. There's going to be a little qualifier in just a bit. So they joined fellow billionaire Jeff Yass, a strong proponent of school choice, as the main donors to the super PAC. You can check out the super PAC's filings with the FEC for yourself here. I went and looked. This is all accurate information. And then there's a correction here. Stevens gave $5 million when the super PAC was founded in early 2025. The five billionaires, Yass, Stevens, Musk, Timoshev, and Ackman, now account for more than 88% of VPAC's funding. That's the name of the super PAC. So Vivek Ramaswamy is raking in the money from the billionaires. And we have talked about Vivek Ramaswamy on the show before, because again, Ohio stories, we've talked about his affiliation with the Les Wexner of all of Ohio. And listen, and this is just my opinion, come for me, I don't care, but Vivek Ramaswamy has been very strategically placed in a position right now in order to continue the facilitation of the technocracy takeover in the state of Ohio. It's well underway. We're already largely there. Les Wexner has done an amazing job over the past many decades of really taking over Ohio. But Vivek Ramaswamy is being very strategically placed in Ohio to further that agenda, to make sure that the data centers go up, to make sure that Flock gets to continue putting their cameras up, to make sure that we talked about the drone plant that's being built in, I think it's Chillicothe, Ohio, which is not that far from me, where they're going to have high school kids building drones for war. That's what's happening here. Yes, I'm not joking, Kit. That's what
I remember this. I'm gonna forget the name of it, but there was a movie that starred Robin Williams, and he was like, he inherited this toy company, and he was
Toys. It's called Toys.
Oh, Toys, right.
And
there was a scene where there was this corporation, this guy creating this military base,
with kids.
And he was having them play video games. He was playing video games, having them launch the drones. So here's what's going to happen: the high schoolers are going to be building the drones, and the little kids will be playing with the drones on their little video game systems, and they'll be live streaming on Twitch, Kick, and YouTube.
Yeah, Hollywood always tells us what's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Always tell us what's coming.
So I have little droners. That's great.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so here we go. Ex-Doge leader Elon Musk donates $5 million to pro-Vivek Ramaswamy super PAC. Just remember, they did have a falling out. So I think it's interesting that Elon Musk is giving him so much money. So billionaire Elon Musk donated $5 million to super PAC backing his former Department of Government Efficiency co-leader Vivek Ramaswamy for governor of Ohio. The SpaceX founder and Tesla CEO donated $5 million to the super PAC, Victors Not Victims, on May 8th, more than a year after Ramaswamy left Doge to launch a bid to replace term-limited Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, according to campaign finance records reported on July 15th. After the 2024 election, President Donald Trump picked Musk and Ramaswamy to co-lead the Government Efficiency Organization, but Ramaswamy left the effort shortly after to run for Ohio governor amid reports of friction between him and Musk. Still, Musk was an early supporter of Republican Ramaswamy's gubernatorial bid, writing on X that Ramaswamy had his, quote, full endorsement, end quote, on February 24th, 2025. The $5 million donation was Musk's first backing Ramaswamy's bid. Victors Not Victims, or VPAC, reported a $12.2 million in contributions between April and June. Other donors include Veeam software founder Ratmir Timashev, billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, and entrepreneur Ross Stevens. VPAC's top donor remains Pennsylvania businessman Jeff Yass, who advocates for school choice and private school scholarships. Yass has donated $20 million to the super PAC. Ramaswamy will face Democrat Dr. Amy Acton, former head of the Ohio Department of Health, in the November 3rd general election. And she's a hot mess express, too. She shut down the state of Ohio during COVID and did all the dumb stuff that happened during COVID. So Ohio's screwed. I've said it before on the show. Please send help.
No. I gotta steal your line. Ohio, we're effed.
We're fucked. Yeah. Yes, we are. We really are in Ohio. It's a really unfortunate situation here. Lex Wessner has taken over the state. We're stuck with Dr. Amy Acton or Vivek Ramaswamy to take over for Mike DeWine. Like, it just keeps, just keep punching me in the face. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine,
Jeez,
guys. Everything's fine.
You make Chicago politicians look like saints and actually all-time productive members of society. Why are you trying to take our belt, Ohio?
Sorry, man. I'm telling you, Ohio's been on a steady shift towards chaos for a while. But it just, like, the past, I would say, really the past decade or so, it's really gotten out of control. But I mean, if we're just being honest, it's been since Les Wexner came and started taking over everything and, buying towns and taking over government and all of that stuff. Like, he really is in full control over the state of Ohio. That's just the reality of it. So again, I'm asking, please send help or booze or something so I can just drink my way through it.
I don't think you're going to get the Knights of Rohirrim, but I would say if you are, if you want to make things even more depressing, like right now, you got a lot of people on the right who are supporting Vivek, your best friend. Just so you guys know, that super PAC, there'll be a click clone copy of it if the liberals ever get control of it. So they'll do the same thing. It will exist, but they'll give it a shade of blue, and then no one will say nothing.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. I think most people are familiar with the fact that I don't like any politicians. I think all of them are corrupt and untrustworthy. I don't vote. I don't think electoral politics is worthwhile. I think that the entire system is corrupt front to back, top to bottom, and you can't beat them playing the game that they control with rules that they can change whenever they want. So don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that it is solely Republicans or it's just Vivek or that it's whatever. I'm just telling you that, and by the way, Vivek Ramaswamy, none of his donors come from the state of Ohio. It's all rich and fancy people who don't live in Ohio, have never lived in Ohio, know nothing about Ohio politics, but they're funneling just a crap ton of money because, again, in my opinion, he is being strategically placed to oversee the further technocratic takeover of the state. And again, we're really already there, but he is just like that kind of final nail in the coffin. So there you have it. Okay. I think we are going to switch to Rumble, friends. So if everybody wants to bounce out of here, head over to Rumble. And then I think Misha's going to jump in with some super chats. So we will see you over there.